Hey everybody, welcome. Today we have a panel discussion for you on this. What's the title of the session? I'm sorry.
NSC, a pathway towards sustainability.
Okay, a pathway towards sustainability. You know, we wanted to do something a little different this time. We've come. Many of you may have seen us speak in the past about the standard as it was going on through its development. And we wanted to change this because the standards the set of standards is really close to approval. We expect them to come out within a month or two, and we wanted to spend some time talking with you about how the standard would work for you as an industry member, what you could, what resources are made available, how you can engage in the system. So rather than kind of go through the mundane criteria of the standard and whatnot. So today we have a panel discussion. I'm going to start out by walking us through the standards, explaining which standards apply to who, depending on the type of facility you are, whether you need to get certified to them or if you're interested or not. Kind of set the table. Kianda Franklin is here from NSF. She's going to talk with you. They're a very well-known and respected third-party accreditation service that's been working with the NSC through the development of this process. And she's going to speak to us today about the steps she would take to engage with them from a certification standpoint. And then we have Brenda Edwards and Bernard Buster here to share with you their experiences because they've had the unique pleasure of pilot testing the standard as we work through the bugs. And so they have a wealth of experience that they've accumulated as they've gone through this process that they can share with you. And then we'll all be available to answer questions, whether they be specific about the standard or specific about the implementation of it going forward. So with that, let me go ahead and jump in and say the standards. So we began this process with the recognition that we really needed to do something, namely develop a standard that would enable the stone industry to engage with the green building movement because it's become such a driver over the last few years, and many of your competitors are already doing this and are way ahead. And so we began by developing what we call NSC 373, which is a standard for the sustainable production of dimension stone. And as we worked through that, it became apparent that we needed to do some work in other sections, not just the people who are physically altering the characteristics of the stone, namely the quarriers and processors, but also everybody who handles it, because that's the expectation of the marketplace. They want to make sure that the stone's been handled and treated in a sustainable way from the time it's been removed from the ground till the time that they purchased it. So that, as we came to that realization, we also embarked on the development of a chain of custody standard. And so I'm going to be talking about both of those with you today. But namely, if you look at the different color sections, anybody who physically alters the stone, the characteristics of the stone itself, would certify under 373, and anybody who's just handling the stone without physically altering it would certify under the chain of custody. So I just said, if you quarry or fabricate stone, NSC 373 is the standard that you need to become knowledgeable about and engage with. So you may certify to NSC 373 under some specific conditions. And this gets to the scope of the standard. So if you quarry or fabricate stone to yield natural dimension stone cut and finished to specs, then this would be the standard for you. Also, NSC 373 covers natural dimension stone accepting the production of stone that's used for specific small purposes, things like crushed stone, fines, powder, for any purpose. So those kinds of activities are not currently within the scope of NSC 373, and there has been some discussion over time of perhaps expanding this to cover those later on, but currently it does not cover it. If you're located in the U.S. or internationally, it is an international scope standard, so we anticipate that it will be available to both companies domestic and internationally. And the important thing here is that it's centered on the ownership of the stone. So if you obtain ownership of the stone at any time and you engage with all of these, if you meet the criteria of all of these, then NSC 373 is the standard that you would deal with. So the standard, the sustainability standard for quarry and production, NSC 373, is really comprised of two different types of criteria. The first being required criteria. Those criteria are required for you to be certified. Obviously, that's pretty self-explanatory. There are also optional criteria, a set of optional criteria, that you may or may not choose to certify to. The way the standard is currently developed, you actually can get certified to NSC 373 without accomplishing any of the optional criteria. But if you want to achieve higher levels under the certification scheme, you need to meet some of the optional criteria to accumulate points, because it's a point-based standard. So as you meet individual criteria, optional criteria, then there's points assigned to those, and you can accumulate those to reach those higher levels. The way the standard works, again, is as your company engages with the process, you accumulate those points by demonstrating compliance to the different criteria. So you do that through an audit process with a third-party vendor. Currently, NSF International has been working with us to do that, but in the future there may be other organizations, and quite frankly it's an ANSI-based standard, so you have the option of going to other third-party certifiers if you would like, if they become familiar and offer that service to audit your claims. And then, as with any standard, you must submit the data to demonstrate compliance with those criteria. And then finally, certification is on a site-specific basis in the standards. So if you're a quarrier with different sites, many of the criteria are specific to the site that you'd be dealing with. So only the stone produced at that particular site that's been certified would be able to carry the genuine stone label. The standard itself is broken into many different criteria that are organized under different themes. As you can see, they're pretty wide-ranging, and they're focused on kind of a life cycle approach to sustainability. We have a number of different sections ranging from water and energy and solid waste to the transportation and how you handle and logistically move the stone, to other things like safe chemicals management, corporate governance, and human health and safety. As you can see, the number of optional points under each section really depends on the number of criteria and what they achieve, and they're weighted to kind of coincide with the difficulty of achieving some of those. All told, we have 18 different requirements under NSC 373, and they total 41 points under the standard. And I guess the last point I'd like to mention is that the standard does anticipate the ability for some innovation. That's pretty common. If for those of you who are familiar with LEED allows for the earning of innovation credits. So if you're doing something along the way in your production that you think leads to better sustainability, you have the option under the standard to submit that for consideration for additional points. So I mentioned the requirements, and I don't want to step us through the entire standard and each one of the criteria to talk it through, because that would take a much longer meeting. But I thought for those of you considering engaging this and thinking about what the minimum requirements would be for you, there is a bronze tier to the standard where if you just meet the requirements that you can get certified. So I've listed out some of the requirements under the standard. As I said, there's 18, but here's a few of them. So within the standard, the types of activities that are required are things like creating inventories around which you can manage and you can plan and then manage your consumption for things like water and energy, waste generation, excess material production if you're a quarry. And the way these credits work is that you establish a baseline and then you measure improvement against that baseline over time. So in the standard, you might set your baseline for the current year that you're certifying, and then you would be expected to improve kind of over time. Now, there's some consideration, and there was quite a bit of talk, and I think Brenda's going to talk about this a little bit, came up yesterday, that, of course, as you improve, or if you certify to a higher level, demonstrating continual improvement becomes difficult. But I don't really think that's a barrier here, because companies that tend to track and measure things tend to do the kinds of activities that would, the next step of activities that would begin to accumulate optional points. So while you might not accumulate as many under the specific criteria, you tend to kind of gather them in other ways. So we don't feel that's an impediment. One of the things is, one of the required criteria is a minimum of 25% water recapture, and of course transportation, tracking, and management. There's a number of these requirements. I'm not going to read them all. We've got some around post-quarry closure and reclamation planning. These are simple things that basically get, again, to the planning and control of your site as it currently exists. And as we went through this process, many of the quarries and processing facilities already had these kinds of things, at least in our work group. They were either demanded by the state or they had already done some of this stuff. There are some corporate governance prohibitions on things like forced labor, child labor. That stuff's law in this country, but when you go internationally, it may not be. So much of this, what the standard's trying to do is create a level playing field across domestic and international boundaries as well. And then, of course, we get into chemical usage, and while some of these are, while these criteria are some of the more difficult ones under the standard, as I think some people in the room can attest, really the requirements for chemical usage are just that you be aware of the chemicals that you're using and the hazards that are associated with those, and that you train your employees to that. Some of the more difficult optional criteria to achieve are the elimination of those chemicals going forward, and as such they tend to earn much more points. So if you're a company and you are engaged in the certification process, you step through the criteria, you target the ones that you think you can achieve, you accumulate or you gather the information that you would need to demonstrate conformance to all those criteria, and you would submit them to a third-party vendor. They would review those, and if they adjudicate, I guess, that you do comply to them, then you achieve certification, and the certification you would achieve would depend on what you've accumulated. So the minimum level, again, is bronze, which we term as just all the requirements, but you can achieve silver, gold, and platinum as you begin to accumulate some of the other points. So if you're a quarry or processor, that works great, but suppose you're not a quarry or processor, like how do we engage? So if you, as I showed in the initial diagram, if you don't, then the NSC chain of custody standard is the one that might apply to you. And this really became apparent when we started working on the standard and we tried to map out the product supply chain, and we ended up with something that kind of looked like this. And I love this diagram, so I stuck it in here. It probably doesn't belong in the presentation, but it just demonstrates kind of the different paths that Stone can take to reach the end user, and why a chain of custody standard became really relevant in what we were doing. The chain of custody standard was developed after we had a draft of NSC 373, and it focuses primarily on the documentation and logistics and storage and handling of stone once you retain ownership, until you transfer ownership to somebody else. So the way the NSC chain of custody standard would work is that the quarry operator, the originator of a piece of stone, when that stone is extracted from the ground, it's assigned a unique identifier, which is shorthanded here for a monitoring system capable of tracking the stone. But basically, that stone is tracked by the quarry operator. That information is contained on the documentation that gets transferred to the next person in the chain of custody. If it's a processor, it goes to the processor. Then when the processor's done with it, they attach their information, and it begins to accumulate into a log of where the chain of custody is gone. In order for the chain of custody, in order for a piece of stone to be sold as genuine stone, certified genuine stone. Thank you. Every step along the way must have been, every transfer of ownership must be, the owner must be certified to one of these two standards. So if at any time, even though it's been quarried by somebody who's certified to NSC 373 and it's processed by somebody, but if someone along the way who's not certified to the chain of custody buys that stone or obtains ownership of it and then sells it, then the chain of custody is broken, and that stone forever from that point forward cannot be deemed as certified genuine stone. So at the transfer of ownership, this information is transferred. All owners must be certified. So much like the other standard, NSC 373, the criteria here are organized into themes, primarily centered around quality management, which gets at the overall corporate operations, what your expectations are as a member of the chain of custody. Things like verifying when you buy stone from somebody that they are in fact certified and that the information you're getting on the documentation that you received is correct, and that organization is currently and there's certified, and that certification is current and up to date, as well as other kind of more broad arching things. Also, material receipt and storage, that gets at not just the way you receive it, but how you store it and the fact that you keep it segregated from non-certified stones, so that you can be sure that within your operation that it's not somehow being commingled. Volume control, that's an auditing system. It kind of gets at an auditing system to make sure that at no time you're selling more stone that's certified than you actually purchased. It's kind of a check and balance system. The sales and delivery, those are the requirements for documentation, and then there's some stipulations for how you can apply the label if you're selling to an end user or if you're outsourcing the production of stone. Much like the NSC 373, this standard is focused on ownership of the stone. So if you're handling the stone but you are not obtaining ownership, you do not have to be certified under this. It's only the owner of the stone that guarantees the chain of custody. And so the requirements under outsourcing are for the owner of the stone who might be outsourcing, say, processing work without the transfer of ownership. So that's what that's addressing. So just an example of what this documentation system might look like. This is from one of the criteria. When you sell the stone, this is the kinds of information that you would be expected to provide as part of the chain of custody. Obviously, the name of your organization, name of a customer, date of sale, those kinds of things. But also, to be specific, a description of the product, including the form of the product, the material type, the color, and unique identifier. What we mean by a unique identifier is a way that you within your organization can track a piece of stone to make sure that it is not commingled, and that you, if you're called upon at a later date, can attest to the chain of custody information and where you got it and where you sent it and that kind of thing. The unique identifier can be a picture, it can be a code number, it can be a purchase order. However you do it, we're not being we're not trying to tell you how to do that. We leave that up to you, but if you certify to this, you'll have to demonstrate that you have a system in place that can do that. You also have to include the origin of a product, where it came from, including information about the quarry, which might go beyond the typical chain of custody information. All previous chain of custody data obtained to that point, so you have to pass that on down the road as you go. And then, of course, when you get certified to this, you will receive, as with any certification, you will receive a registration number. Is that the right term for it, Ken? I guess. And that would be a number specific to your organization, and you would have to attach that to any paperwork that went along. Okay. So who does this apply to? I think I've kind of said this, but just to be specific, the chain of custody certification is required for all organizations taking legal ownership. And specifically, if you perform one of the following activities: if you pass on the genuine stone claim to subsequent customers through sales and delivery documents, then you must be certified. Of course, if you're not, if you it's genuine stone and you don't, the person you're selling it to doesn't care, then there's no point at that point in the chain of custody. So that it would just be broken. If you want to apply the genuine stone label on a product, or if you want to process or transform NSC certified products. And by that, I'm not talking about changing the form of the product, but in terms of like repackaging or relabeling. This is important. This is who, if you, the following are organizations that do not need to certify to NSC chain of custody, just to be clear. So if you're a retailer selling to an end user, you don't have to certify to the chain of custody. If you're an individual organization, if you are an end user who's purchasing it, you don't have to. If you're an organization that's providing services without taking legal ownership, like a logistics company that's transporting or storing, you wouldn't have to worry about that. Or an agent that's brokering trades between buyers and sellers. And finally, if your facility is already certified under NSC 373, you don't have to certify to the chain of custody. And the reason that is because one of the requirements under NSC 373 is that you meet all the requirements of the chain of custody. So you don't have to obtain both. Okay. So where can you get help? Well, we realized kind of early on that this got complicated. and that people's initial reactions were that was kind of a daunting task. And so early on we discussed with the NSC the development of a conformance document, conformance guide. And it serves a number of functions both for the NSC in terms of administering the program, but also for you. And so we see this guide as something that could act as a resource for companies that want to engage in the process, that are looking for help. And this guide steps through the criteria one by one and defines very clearly the data and documentation required to demonstrate compliance with the standard. We're working with NSF to make sure that what's in there is something that they would accept as information. That's not to say that's the only way you can demonstrate compliance, but it's a way you can. And so if you're looking at the criteria and you're saying, gosh, how would I prove this, then the conformance guide will help you with that. It will also provide key guidance for industry members seeking to certify by containing sample data collection forms or reporting forms that you can fill out that are useful. As typically when you launch a standard, you learn things about it. There are some ambiguities that require interpretations. We're thinking about this as being a living document that will be updated with those kinds of learnings. So as you go forward, it will contain things like interpretations, and we're also building off the experiences of our brave pilot testers who've gone through this to try to provide some of their wisdom to you in terms of how you might do that. It's currently under development, in part because we're still balloting the final standards, and a document like this is very specific to the language, but it's scheduled to come out at the same time as the standards, so it should be available to you on the first day that you might be interested. And you can obtain this through the NSC. We have people in the room who can talk about that. Where can you get a copy of the draft standards? So the standards right now are currently they're both being balloted. They've both been revised, and they're out for public review and being balloted. If you're interested in seeing the standards themselves in their current form, you can go to naturalstonecouncil.org, and if they're not already up on the website, we'll make sure that they're up there by the time you get back. So, okay. Some other resources that the NSC, for those of you who haven't been too engaged with the work that we've been doing, have made available. We've developed some life cycle inventory data sets that can be useful in the performance and earning some of the credits that are within the standard. We have a set of best practices that I think would be useful as well in case studies. And of course, at the end, we have the conformance document. And again, all these are, I think, Jane, they're currently available on the NSC website. So if you've been wondering how you can use those, the standard will show you. Key dates. So NSC 373, as I said, is out for public review. The public review period ends March 10th. It's currently being balloted by the voting body, the Joint Committee, and I think that ballot ends tomorrow. Like it's the 30th. I'd say it's 29th. Saturday. Okay, so it'll be over within a day or two, and we'll have a good sense about where it stands. Although we very much expect it to be approved. It's been approved before, and the current version just has some revisions to kind of clarify some of the ambiguities we saw in the language. And so we expect the standard, once it gets through the public review period and we respond to the comments that we get and make whatever changes we need to make by March 31st. The chain of custody standard, likewise, was circulated earlier this week. And I actually sent it out on Friday, but I understand that some people didn't get it, so I'll send it out again. Just make sure, and we'll post it to the NSC website. And for any of you with organizations that might want to post it, you can contact me, and I'll make it available to you as well. We're looking for public review and balloting of that to be completed by February 28th, in which case the standard will be released at that time, and then the conformance document, as I've already mentioned, will be released to coincide with NSC 373. So that's it. It's just kind of a brief overview, but I wanted to give you some flavor of how the system works. And I think we'll take questions at the end. Is that right? Okay. So next up, I'd like to introduce Kianda Franklin. She's, as I mentioned, is a standards expert at NSF International, and she's here to speak with you about how you might, that half of the equation. So do you have one of these already?
Yes, I have.
Okay. This is yours.
Thank you.
Let me start this up. 1 second.
Good morning. Today I'm going to go over the certification process, how to apply, and what's involved in that process. Before I go into that, we're going to talk about NSF, just to give you an overview of NSF. And what NSF, we've been around for over 60 years. We're an international company, and our headquarters in Ann Arbor, Michigan. What we do, we develop voluntary standards for public health and safety to protect the environment. We also do third-party certification for products and food.
I can't hear you.
Oh, you can hear me? Is that better? Is it better? Okay. We also do third-party certification for product certification. We also have our primary business as drinking water, food, sustainability, wastewater, and also consumer products. We also provide management system services, ISO 14001. We provide testing, auditing services, and consulting services. And just to kind of, we have offices all over the world. We also have services for auditing all over the world as well, too. From sustainability, we have either developed or partner with certain companies to create certain standards for sustainability. We have 140 carpet, resilient flooring, furniture, fabric, wall covering products, single-ply roofing membranes, and we also have green and chemical products and processes and so on. Applying for certification. How to apply for certification. We have a 5-step process applying for certification. First step is basically contact your NSF representative. The second one will be complete an information form. Once you contact your NSF representative, we will give you an information form, and you fill it out, and we'll complete. Once we get that form, we will create a proposal for you, and we will send it back. Once that proposal is accepted by you, we'll start the process of certification. And when that process starts, we tend to have what we call NSF tools, and to help you track certification, help the certification go smoothly, because the certification process is very intense. It's not very intense, a little intense. I don't want to scare anybody. So what we have first we give you what we call an audit point matrix, and this is to help you with the certification process. And this would track what points you're applying for, what points you've earned, what points need more information, what points will be earned once it's verified during your on-site audit. We also have what we call a kickoff webinar, where we have a webinar where we do a webinar to answer any questions with your team, go over the whole process and details of what needs to happen for your certification. And also what we offer, we call a toxicology webinar. Certain sections, and even for all of our other standards, toxicology sections seem to be where we get a lot of questions that a lot of need more guidance. What we did was we created a webinar that's strictly towards the toxicology sections, which is section 12 of the standard. Also, we'll be having the document guide, which is NSC, is in the process of developing. This right here is an example of the audit point matrix. This is the credits, what you're applying for. In the site, it has points applied, granted, contingent on site, and it should have additional information needed, but it didn't. Mess it up. The certification process. Once you start the certification process consists of two main things, which is the document review and the on-site audit. So once you have all your tools and you've been gathering your documentation and you send it to NSF, we do what we call a document review. This process to review the first round will probably take 2 to 3 weeks. Once that's complete, your project manager will send you what we call an on-site or action item list. And that gives you credit by credit what points you achieved, what points will be achieved contingent on site, and what points we need more additional information for. Once that process, it varies of how much information is open or how fast you get information back to us. But once that process is done, we go to the on-site audit. And the on-site audit is basically 1 or 2 days, verify everything from your document review. This is pretty much a certification timeline. Document review is about 3 weeks for the first initial. Usually it may take 2 to 3 times back and forth as far as follow-up documentation. Once that's complete, we start the on-site audit, which is scheduled at your convenience, and that's usually 1 or 2 days, depending on how many sites or what's your certification scope. And once after your on-site audit, we have follow-up, and that's usually minimum. Once that, you're certified. And just to kind of get more information about the document review process, and we're going to spend a little bit more time on this because this is probably the most intensive step of the whole process. I'm quite sure Bernard and Brenda's going to go into more details with you on that. But what it is basically we will not schedule an on-site audit until the document review is complete. Supporting documentation needs to be credited for each document. Summary tables, reports, Excel spreadsheets, things like that. That's what kind of documentation that we need to show our conformance. In preparing your documentation for certification, we recommend the following. Complete the point matrix. And it's a good idea to go for more points than what you need certification unless you're going for bronze, which is all prerequisites. Establish an internal team for gathering documentation. It seems, from our experience, it seems to work better when you have a team of people that can help gather documentation instead of one person. And also, from a document review, this is the kind of things that we look for when we get your documentation. And one is information technically correct, are all locations included, are performance periods and baseline years correct, and were all parts of the requirements met. Because sometimes in the standard, it may have 2 or 3 requirements, and maybe the documentation only met one of them. So we just make sure we check all that stuff. Document results. Once the documentation is received by NSF, we divide it up into specialists for review. With this standard, we'll be divided up in 2 parts. One of our, what we call our auditor, what he would do, he will review all the parts except the chemical sections, and those chemical sections will go directly towards the toxicologist in our office. A detailed documentation is reviews conducted for each credit applied for, and results of the review will be on the point matrix and sent to you prior to your on-site audit. The review process, on-site audit. Once your documentation is complete, majority of your requirements are contingent on site status. Your project manager will go ahead and schedule your on-site audit. Before you receive your audit date, you receive an agenda that includes the following. Pretty much it will have how your meeting will go. Opening meeting, closing meeting, tour of the facility, and list items to confirm. So that way you'll know that, don't have any surprises. You'll know who needs to be involved and what time everything is going to happen. The on-site audit is a confirmatory, it's not exploratory audit. And what the auditor will be doing is basically confirming everything what your documentation says. And also the auditor will work with you on developing your schedule. Interviews are usually limited to those involved in reporting and gather documentation. And our auditor that actually does this, he's very flexible. If you want to if someone's going to be out the office or have to leave early, he'll have that interview first, so he's very flexible. Once you're certified, you completed your document review, on-site audit, and everything has been met, you receive certification, and what we call a certification listed. So when you're certified, you'll be listed on the NSF website, and it will include your company name, your level, certification number, and certification period. So this way, all your clients will be able to directly reference your certified courier processor and be able to pull up a printable certificate. This is an example of our NSF 140 listing. So it will look similar to that, but maybe just a little slight difference. Certification audit cycle. Certification is every 3 years. So year 1, when you're certified, that's what we call the initial certification, and that's where you'll have your document review and on-site. Year 2 and 3 is what we call the surveillance review, which is just consists of document only. So this would just basically be more water, energy, things, updates of those information. Year 4 is what we call a recertification review, and this is pretty much an initial review all over again for a document review and on-site audit. Any questions? Oh, well, I think it's after, right? Oh. Well, thank you. I think the next person we have, Brenda and Bernard. Are you guys doing together?
Yeah. I think the table mics will work. Can everyone hear? Are we good?
Can anyone not hear us?
Oh, I'm sorry.
We don't have slides. We're just going to talk.
The mic's might be on, might not be on.
I think that
You guys could use these, though. We could pass these back and forth.
yeah,
These are not on?
I think they are.
Okay. Can everyone hear us?
All right.
All right. We heard that. Okay. You go.
I think basically what we want to do now, I guess.
We want to assure you that we have lived through this.
There you go.
Okay? to make it short and sweet, and it's not as mean and vicious looking as we all thought it was at the very beginning, or that's how I feel about it.
Speak for yourself.
So we've taken different approaches. I am a quarrier and a fabricator with separated facilities. Bernard is a quarrier and a processor, and his facilities are together. So we've taken different approaches with this. I'm going to let him talk first on his.
Well, the approach that Lion Sandstone, my wife and my company took, was to aim for the bottom. Knowing that Brenda was doing a pilot certification and that she was in a position probably to achieve, a much higher level than our company was, I thought that for a small company like ours, if we were to pilot a certification at the bronze level, that would give a good, in a sense, model for other companies who are more similar to our company than they are to a company like Texas Stone or Cold Spring or another big operation. So it also gave us an opportunity to be able to keep track of the amount of time that it has taken up to this point, and of course moving further on, to actually accomplish the requirements in the certification. So I think you initially started out.
Initially, I opened my mouth and said that I wanted to achieve the platinum level, and I am nowhere close to being anywhere close to Cold Spring Granite. I am a small company, but
it all depends on your perspective.
Okay. So I backed off of that because once I got into the actual working of the standard, I found out that there were things that I could not achieve immediately. So for instance, is where I live out in the middle of nowhere in West Texas, I do not have options for my electricity. We have just become deregulated December 31st, so now I have some options. So I took the energy portion and I did the required, did my inventory, and now I'm going to go forward and try to come up with reducing my electricity and new ways of doing things. So that's a small instance. The thing that in the standard that I have argued with for several years was transportation. You do not get any points. It's all required under transportation. And so I, being the person that I am going to try to find a simple way of getting the requirements that they are asking for. So everyone has an accounting system, and you have to track the mileage and all the different, I can't even remember all the criteria. Yes?
Could you move the microphone a little closer?
Okay, is this better?
Yes, can you move it closer?
It's not on.
I don't think it's on, Mo. I'll try to look up and talk loud.
We hear Burton very well.
Okay, is this better?
Got that one.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So we are now tracking all of our transportation when we send an invoice out. We have the mileage. We know where it's going. This is also going to help us in the chain of custody to know where the material's going and everything. I have found a lot of things in my company that we were not doing correctly, and we were wasting a lot of time, energy, and money. For instance, we have a shrink wrap machine that we wrap around every pallet of stone we send out. Well, my guys that do that would be standing there and talking to someone, and they just let it keep wrapping. So I'm out there tracking all of this, and I find out that 10 wraps is enough to go anywhere instead of 30 or 40 wraps, and that's costing us money. So in tracking some of these things, it has actually saved us money. We track every the pallet, which is recyclable. All of them are recycled. How much lumber, packing material, everything is shipped, and know to the penny now what it's costing us. So this has really helped, because I'll be real honest, we never tracked it before, ever. We have our water wells, and we're tracking our gallons now on every well we have. Site management, I have a lot of acreage out there, so I didn't have to do anything with it. Now I'm taking care of my waste, and I'm crushing it. There's nothing that we don't recycle now. We're putting a lot of our scrap into thin veneer, palletizing it, and selling it. So it's just changing your attitude sometimes on your company and how you're working with it. Yes.
Did you use a third party to do any of the developing processes or doing any inventory?
Yes, I did. Okay. Number one, we are not, in the state of Texas, we're not very regulated on a lot of these things. And they wanted what was it called? What kind of assessment? Environmental assessment. Well, I have rattlesnakes where I live, so who wants to talk about the rattlesnakes? But I got into this and found out that we have nothing on the endangered species list except a little bitty lizard that lives in the northeast corner of our county. But I went through, and the first quote that I got on the environmental assessment was $20,000. And I thought, I'm going to stop now. I'm not going to go any further. But then I started looking at other companies and other prices, and I had my assessment done for $2,000. But I know a lot of you, when you do go in, because Texas does not require all of this, so when you get a quarry permit, that you have to have these assessments. I didn't, so I had to go to some extra expense, just like reclamation. Texas doesn't have a reclamation of your quarries. I had to go to my county commissioners and tell them what we were planning on doing on reclamation of our quarries. And at first they thought I had lost my mind because we're out in the country. And they thought, what are you talking about? And then they decided it'd be nice to have a community swimming pool in one of our quarries. And I said, well, that's not a bad idea either. So we worked it out, and I have a reclamation plan, and the county's all gung-ho for it. And it's just taken one step at a time. NSF has been very, very helpful. If you do decide to do this, ask a lot of questions. They help you with spreadsheets. They furnish you some spreadsheets. And like Kenda said, when it comes down to it, when you submit a section, they're going to tell you where you need to go or what you need to improve on. So,
unlike Brenda down in the Wild West of Texas, Colorado is a little bit more regulated state. So the state of Colorado does require quarries to operate with basically a permit. The basic purpose of the permit is to ensure that at the end of the quarry's life, or during the quarry's life, that the quarry is either in the process of being reclaimed or will be reclaimed at the end of the life. So to a certain extent, all of that is something that we can just submit, in a sense, our certification or our permit application to the NSF, and I think that that's probably going to cover 80 or 90% of the requirement there. You asked Brenda about third-party work on sections of it, and I'm actually going to use some of the people that Brenda used to do the corporate government part of the permit. That's Section 9. We have submitted. There are a total of, I think, 14 sections if you include the innovation section. The first 4 sections are pretty much just informational sections. So the actual sections that require a response pretty much total up to, I believe, 8, and we have submitted 6 of those 8. I wanted to submit as many sections as I could for review prior to this session here and get some feedback on it, which I did. So I have gotten responses to what I submitted, and nothing scary. There's a few things that I think I need to have a little further conversation with them about, and some things that I'll be talking to Jack about that might be useful to include in the conformance document. But I can honestly say that we're going to live to tell the tale of this, and want to assure you all that it's not that daunting. At a session yesterday, someone asked how close we were to achieving the requirements in the standard when we started. In other words, prior to the standard, were we operating in a manner that meant that we didn't have to make any major shifts to adhere to the standard? And I hope my answer was clear yesterday. I think the answer that I would give right now is that we feel like we were pretty close. We were doing things like recycling our solid waste. For example, all the cardboard boxes that your parts and your supplies come in. We were doing that recycling, but we weren't actually measuring the amount of it. We are tracking, of course, the cost of our fuel, but we had never actually recorded the gallons of fuel that we're buying. So we will, start doing that. We in Colorado, of course, we are very, very limited on water. Our annual rainfall is about 11 inches per year, so it's very dry, very arid. I think you're about in that same range too. We did have a water event here this last fall that sort of scrambled some things and delayed our work on the standard. But we're going to be in a position where I think right from the very start we can. To answer your question about what was the most difficult, I think the jury is still out on that. I've submitted sections, and I've got responses to sections. I think the answer will come as I work through what the responses were to what I submitted. How much, in a sense, pushback do I get? So I'll have to take the fifth on that for a while. Peter?
One of the things that's been talked about, so you go through the certification process and you achieve whatever level you achieve. Now, I know, Jack, in his presentation, you talked about the need for continuous improvement. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've got a company that just invested in water reclamation and a whole bunch of other stuff. And for 3 years, they're using the same equipment, and they don't achieve improvement in, they're doing really well, but they're not achieving improvement in a given area. To recognize that when you measure, you improve, because they're always looking at trying to, but if it doesn't happen, is your certification in danger? I mean, is the company going to lose their certification? Because if I achieve a silver, is that going to be a idea that reflects the same type of performance 3 years, 4 years when I go through research?
Yeah, I was actually making notes about my presentation about how I could improve it for next time. And one of the things I think that I would like to stress is that when our approach to writing the criteria for the different sections really envisioned stages of growth, if you want to think of it that way. And at the very bottom, the base that you start out with is measurement, and management, perhaps. Once you know what you're doing, then managing it. In many of the sections, really that's the requirement level. We require that you measure it, that you develop a plan for it. We don't really weigh in on whether your plan's good or bad, or whether it's we just require that you create one, and that's the requirement. The kinds of things that you're talking about where you have to actually perform, you have to perform, those are usually optional criteria, at least at this point in the standards history. The only one I can think of that's required as far as a minimum threshold is water recycling, and that's something that everybody should have at least a decent handle on. So, and then the advanced stages of water recycling, as you get higher up, then you can earn more points. But the minimum threshold, 25%, was the only one I could think of. So in that sense, the bronze tier of the standard, at least from somebody who works with different industries, was not really that difficult. It's just requiring you to be self-aware. And then, so at the bottom tiers, measurement and then management, and then the next one would be performance and then leadership. And so you would achieve points. And almost every section has optional criteria that kind of ratchet up that way, and that's why I think Brenda's finding it hard to reach platinum, because you really have to accumulate quite a bit of those leadership kinds of points to get it. Example of that with your chemical usage. The requirement is that you know what your chemicals are and what you're aware. The next step is to develop a management plan where you're looking proactively at the chemicals that you're thinking about purchasing and whether they're good or bad. And then at the final tier, you're actually targeting chemicals to get rid of them. That's quite complicated because you have to find something that works just as well as what you're using, and you know something about its chemical makeup and so on. So those are things that I don't imagine a lot of people in this industry are going to be able to achieve right away.
Yeah. You mentioned that anyone that alters itself in this process is required to be NSC 373 certified. Mm-hmm. Well, there's an awful lot of us in the industry that may provide stock blanks. Say you're doing stock type material, you're doing particular material where you put a home surface on it, you put a surface on it. But the end user, either the distributor or whoever, has a small shop where they can put edge treatments on, rock face the edge, maybe sandblast the edge, whatever the case may be. How does that affect them? I mean, if we're shipping stock material out, you take a solid load of Threadwise or Hearthstone out to them, and they have to modify it. I mean, obviously the contractor sometimes will modify it on a job site. He's not certified for that, but he may be required.
Yeah, so we talked quite a bit about that, actually. That came up, I think Todd Schnatzmeyer raised that issue, or perhaps somebody on one of our calls. I'd like to say I've got a really firm handle of it, but I don't work in the industry, so I may not quite understand all the. But the one attempt to address that was the outsourcing criteria, and that you could, if you're a distributor who usually sells to an end user, but you need to kind of do some tinkering on it at the end, you don't have to sell it to somebody to have them do it. You can, while you maintain ownership, you can contract with somebody to do that for you without having to swap around just to stay in conformance. But that requires that whoever does that processing be certified to NSC 373, which can be, if it's a little secondary thing, that may not be realistic, especially initially. But my other thought on that is that when you get that close to the end of the supply chain, the value of the label is only in this being able to sell it to the next step. So, if the end user specifies that they want the treads a certain way and they're ready to buy it and you're contracting out to somebody, is it really important that that person be NSC 373 to the end user? At that point, if the end user says yes, then you're going to do what it takes to get that done, and because that's what you have to do for the sale. If the end user doesn't care, then it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, typically you can't retain ownership. I mean, the sale is made.
Right. So.
Distributor owns the product at that point. So
right.
Maybe it's a moot point, and maybe it is even something worth tracking because the buyer and the distributor.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. Like I said, I don't have a real comfortable sense that we got all the angles covered. I'm not sure. So, I mean, we'd love that feedback in the public comment period if there are situations that you don't think we kind of handled right. But
I've always thought that, consistent with Jack's idea that the closer you get to the end of the chain, and you're actually, in a sense, installing the material in whatever structure it is, that at that point it would seem to me that the buyer has already made the decision and is, in a sense, thinking of it as a certified sustained product, and whatever they want at that point, I think, is fine.
I don't know how you do it any other way.
Yeah.
Certainly what we do. Yeah.
Daniel?
Yeah, I think in all our discussions in the chain of custody meetings, it's kind of us being a distributor. It was mainly like, just a rock face or a thermal edge on a return or something, or maybe Brenda shipped something and one edge didn't get the rock facing on it, so is it really sustainable within all of this to send it back to Texas, have a rock that says that? And I understand if you're going to bullnose it, you're going to hone it, you're going to do a significant modification, then it should follow that, and you should order it that way in advance.
right.
It was basically the rock facing and thermal with maybe an edge. It's a pretty simple thing. It's what we do in-house, in particular bluestone tread. We just order all our treads with a thermal edge, and then they need to have our airstreams or a return done, and we'll modify it. Now, when this becomes implemented, we'll need to order the bullnose ones in advance because we won't be able to do that after the back door and so line if it has to be a compliant product.
Yeah. But when you go to do that, if I could just ask a question, when you go to do that, though, that's a customer spec that they're purchasing the stone. I guess I'm wondering, are you selling to distributors that way, or are you selling directly to?
We're a distributor. We would be selling to that.
Okay, so if you're selling to the end user, it might not matter, because if they purchase the stone from you already as a sustainable stone, and then they say to you, well, can you finish it this way? You've already made the sale. It's no big deal. Yeah, this is all
Makes it easier.
And by the way, I mean this whole.
Be honest and compliant and not be.
Yeah, I mean this.
Loophole, so to speak.
This whole scheme is to provide assurance to the end user that what they're buying is sustainable. So if the end user's engaged at that point, they've already been satisfied with the fact that the stone has a complete chain of custody up to that point. What could change that, honestly, thinking forward, is if something like LEED picks up NSC 373, which is certainly our goal, and if they start saying, well, to the end user, if you want to claim a point, then this has to be done, then then it doesn't matter necessarily what the end user wants because they're trying to prove it to somebody else. That might necessitate change at some point. But right now, I don't, especially when we're lifting the standard up off the ground, that's probably not a very realistic
I
expectation.
don't think you have a problem on it at all.
I think there was some dialogue about, they may buy it and maybe modify it on site as well.
Right. Sure, right.
Scott?
Yeah.
So if Corey is not certified, but if we were to buy something, we got certified under the Corey with the chain of custody, can we change product from what we bought into from full veneer to thin veneer, or we buy slabs and we buy material from Indiana and we fabricate it? Does that then fall in some of that LEED certification or the standard standardization, or is that at that point say, sorry, you didn't buy it from a quarry that was sustainable already, so therefore you're on a lock?
That's the case.
Well, he's going to process it. So if you're a certified processor, can he not do it?
No, he can. Just because you're certified doesn't mean you can't process uncertified stone. You can process whatever you want. But if you want to attach a certified claim to the stone product as it goes upstream, or I'm sorry, as it goes downstream towards the customer, then yes, every step of the way has to be certified, or it doesn't.
So what if we blend products that are your own products that are certified, and you're buying another product and putting into there? That whole product becomes non-certified?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Dennis? You had a question? Okay.
Matt, you have one.
If you're a fabricator and, right now there's, how many quarries are certified to do this?
0.
Right, so we recognize that one of the challenges of the system is going to be bootstrapping it up, right? Because
Okay, but if there's only a handful of quarries in the country, let's say in 5 years that are certified, it becomes a new one.
I think we're hoping.
Unless you can become certified because you're a fabricator, even if the quarry isn't certified.
you can become certified as a fabricator or as a quarry or both, if they're co-located. So
But you just said, though, that unless the quarry is certified, it doesn't matter if you're a certified fabricator, you're SOL because,
Right.
sorry, Mr. Fabricator, if the quarry didn't do it, so you're SOL.
So what'll happen, or what's happened with other standards that we've worked with that work like this, is that you see connections starting to be made between the certified bodies. So if a customer comes to you and you're bidding on a project and says we need certified stone, you may have traditional relationships that you go to with specific quarries for stone, but if they're not certified, then you may have to go outside that relationship to get a certified stone quarry, that stone from a certified quarry, to make that connection. And then, if the top-down requirements are made, then more and more pieces of the puzzle will get certified and these connections will be made. And it'll bootstrap itself up. But you're right. Initially, we have no certified quarries. So if somebody comes to you and says that, you can't really provide that right now. The value of being a certified processor is that you can be a link in that chain to complete that. So if there's a certified quarry like Brenda looking to get a product up and needs processing, she can come to you, or I know she does her own, but she may outsource. You see what I'm trying to say. And you can advertise your company as being certified to try to attract new business that way.
But isn't that somewhat deceiving because you get companies that, such as ourselves, we process our own product, but we buy a lot of products that I know a lot of these companies may not get certified.
Sure.
They don't want to go through the whole process.
So
Isn't that a little deceiving to the architect, to the end users, because you're standing on sustainability, and, so they get all excited about it, and you say, oh, that product's sorry, I'm not. Well, then they're going to look at you as like you're kind of lying to them.
Yeah, so let me be very clear about this. If you're a certified processor or a certified quarry, well, quarry is a little bit different, but if you're a certified processor, it is not saying that every piece of stone you produce carries the genuine stone label. It's saying that you process stone in a way that's consistent, that's deemed sustainable by a third party within the scheme, and that if you're given a piece of stone that you're capable of producing it and pushing it down the supply chain and retaining that label. The label itself, there are two types of labels if you really want to think of it that way. The label itself, the genuine stone label, gets attached to the stone. And so it's a testament to, every step along the way that stone has been handled in a sustainable way. But you can still use that if you achieve that in your advertising, saying, we're a processor that can make that link. We're a processor that has the capability, if given a piece of stone like that, to maintain that and retain that certification. And that's going to be important for anybody who gets certified, because that's how you're going to get paid back on your investment, being able to make those connections and be able to be part of a bid that can achieve what the end user wants. Do you agree with that? I don't want to speak for you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just trying to characterize what the discussions have been within the group.
Dennis?
But at the point that, okay, you've got stone that's coming from an uncertified quarry, you're a certified fabricator.
Right.
Okay. That's like saying you're almost pregnant. You can't complete the chain to get any give or get any lead points for what you've accomplished.
That's right.
That's right.
It's, the end user or USDBC lead Living Building Challenge, they're wanting to know that the stone is quarried, processed sustainably, clear back to its origin. And this is one of the things that I was confused on, because I was hearing at the very beginning of the whole sustainability discussion that, things that were imported could be turned into a sustainable product by virtue of being processed through a certified processing plant. And I kept wondering, what good does that do? But in fact, any foreign product that comes in that wants to be certified sustainable has to have been quarried sustainably. So it's got to go clear back to the point of origin. Otherwise, you haven't got anything.
And by the way, this is consistent with the FSC chain of custody, like the wood forestry certifications. This is not something we created kind of out of the dark. We looked at what was being done consistently, what's been accepted by the marketplace, by LEED, by architects, and by others, the very people that you're trying to appeal to. And those are the requirements that they've created for wood. It's stood up to, and it's been very successful. And we're just trying to mimic that process. So you can't be a little bit pregnant, but you can't be a little bit sustainable either.
I just understand one part. So somebody from overseas goes through this whole sustainability process, gets certified, and I get certified as a COC, but I've got a local stone 50 miles down the road that is identical to the imported, but it's not sustainable. They haven't gone through the process.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I'm importing from 3,000 miles away is more green than the one that's 50 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Because it wasn't quarried sustainably.
Well, we can't attest to whether it was or not.
Yeah, right. It's not certified sustainable.
And I get it. I really get it. But to me, that's total.
Well, you're
more oxymoron. It's just something that is close to thing to be better acceptable.
I think the second part of this is product certification. The first step is company certification. So if I'm talking to an architect, and an architect is looking for participants and partners in the project that is sustainable, I have to have a sustainable company first and foremost. The evolution of this, the market's going to put pressure on people to get the certification all the way together. I don't care if the product is sustainable or not. I want my company to be sustainable. I want to be viewed in that way. And become a person providing. And I can market the hell out of it. So I think that's an important first step. And I wouldn't not do it because I can't take my stone and run it all the way through the end and say it's certified to But the most important thing is, I want to look at where the company is trying to gain efficiencies that measuring and monitoring will do, and gain that credential, you know, to go into a say. And I don't think it's misrepresenting anything, but you can't misrepresent the fact that you're certified. You are. This is the product. The difference between the product and the company.
Right.
And to me, it's really important that the company be certified.
John, did you have a comment?
Yeah, kind of along the same line. I was just going to throw a little bit of a wrinkle into the conversation. And I can envision 5 or 6 years from now, where let's say a new quarry opens up and get this flower here. It's just beautiful, but they're not involved in the system. And it may take them a while to get certified if they do choose to certify at some point. But the architect really wants it. I can envision, depending on how the natural stone industry works with the USGBC to get established with the system, I could see recognition of bringing that material in, but then processing it in a certified way, being worth something. Not as much as if the quarry was certified too, maybe that's worth more. But I can see as it evolves, there could be different ways of recognition.
So it gains some credibility, but not full
Same thing to address the product.
He's right. I think it will.
To get a product, but that doesn't make common sense. So as all this stuff evolves, I think common sense will be applied to the certifications that will change over time. But ultimately, I think there's value in being a certified processor. You do things differently, you do it better. I think the USGBC ought to recognize that, no matter where you get your stuff. But it shouldn't be worth as much as maybe delivering a finished product that is also for you in a certified manner. I think that maybe ought to be worth more. So that depends on how we work with the USGBC or whoever else to recognize the standard and the process of what we're doing as an industry. And it will be evolutionary. I think we're right on the money on that.
And I think there's great value in this whole process. Just for instance, all our documentation's right there. So if somebody comes in with something, you're not. It's running 27 different books and trying to figure out which one goes in. It's all right there. And just looking at how you operate your business. Everybody else says, the costs are way too high. But we never look at what are driving the cost. So this helps look at that side. I think there's great opportunities.
Yeah. Scott, we in working on chain of custody, the chain of custody standard, we sort of did some exercises to figure out, how the chain of custody standard could be gained, and there's ways to do it. In a sense, the fallback position is that, to a certain extent, we just have to trust, to a certain extent, the people that are involved in the chain. And as time passes, if it appears that there is manipulation going on, I think then eventually the chain of custody will have to be adjusted to sort of, try to tackle those issues. I think that's a less a problem with the actual NSC 373 itself, since there's less opportunity. I mean, we could go to the quarry that's right next to us.
So we're going to go for both the quarry and the...
Yeah.
So you go for both?
Yeah.
Through this process, would you look at it and say, I should have just done one at a time, just done the quarry, and then do both together at the same time? It's pretty much consistent.
Our operation. I mean, our quarry is in a sense right on top of our processing facility, or vice versa, I guess would probably be more accurate. We haven't kept our books in such a fashion that there's any way that we could, in a sense, divide the two. So they're, in a sense, they're inextricable from each other. So I don't really think I ever had a choice as to one or the other.
I think we're over our time limit here. I think Jennifer's wanting us to go outside. Are you,
We
Jennifer?
have another session at 10.
Okay. But Bernard and I will step outside, and if you want to look at this, and I'll tell you why I did it the way I did it, okay?